national languages. Well, let's make sure that everybody's doing that, you know, including the indigenous population, so-called.
Thank you. Can you keep our answers short, because we've got a few more questions and we've limited time. Thanks very much. Christopher, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm I'm concerned about this idea of Fortress Europe. I hear it on the doorstep. More and more people talking about protection in Fortress Europe, and I just have to get across to them how naive. And when you when you go through all the costs to you, they actually realise it's not a sensible solution. But the BNP and UKIP are peddling this. I think the EU, to answer the question, the EU has the opportunity to see this from a global perspective, and the vast numbers of people who want to come to Europe naturally, because they see it on television from around the world, that as my Green Party colleague has said, that they are fleeing their states for both economic and political reasons. And I think this is a problem that no politician in the last 40, 50 years has addressed properly. We have more and more failed states which are relying upon EU funds for government. So there's a problem to be dealt with. But there is a solution. The Desertec system that I talked about, this idea of this renewable energy grid, which links together North Africa and Europe. This is a system which will stabilize the North African economies and slow down the immigration from North Africa and even the Sahel, Senegal, Gambia, into Europe. Because for the first time there is a stable economy for those countries. They are able to, if you like, export their solar power to Europe, and get money which stabilizes them. It's a concept that can be applied elsewhere in the world to harness the power of the sun renewably. I think this is one practical answer. And it needs countries working together, but this is one practical answer which will stabilize states and stop this huge immigration of people. It'll encourage people to stay in their countries. I want to mention one other thing there about the UK. I do find that the UK immigration system all over the world is incredibly racist with a capital R. I've got friends who are Muslim, who are Buddhist, and from elsewhere in the world, and the hassle and the rudeness and the aggression that they have had from UK government offices around the world makes them cry, and it makes me to be very, very embarrassed. So there is a small element that needs to be resolved. It's unacceptable the way some wonderful people are treated around the world just for trying to get into Britain on honourable reasons to see their family or to come and work, because there are jobs here for them. So we need to tackle that, but we also need to tackle the global level, and that's where the European Parliament is perfect.
Good, thank you. Sir?
On the matter of immigration, the reason I'm actually quite keen on the European Union, and what it is because it's a common market, and it's a group of loads of nations getting together, and by doing so, it minimises the chance of conflicts and battles and wars. And I'm actually very pro having a global society, a global community. I think it's a very pro-Islamic ideal. But when we look at immigration, we have to look at it in a holistic way. What I'm talking about is this. There is no point us complaining about people wanting to come to Europe to have a better life, just as economic migrants, if we are responsible for blowing up their countries. None of us want to live in Afghanistan. So obviously people from Afghanistan would want to come here. The other thing we also have to look at very carefully, is that when we trade with other countries, we need to pay them a fair price for their produce so that they can earn some money. Not huge conglomerates going over there, and as they do to British farmers in this country, but huge conglomerates going to other countries paying people a pittance. That has got to stop. And thirdly, we're also doing another thing in Europe. We're taking away their human skilled resource. When we don't have doctors and nurses, we just pull them out of Africa, pull them out of India, pull them out of Egypt. Well, then those people don't have their doctors and nurses and their teachers anymore. So what do you want them to do? Of course, in one sense, I said they have every right to come here, because we haven't paid them a proper price for their produce. We haven't, and we can do so. We can do so. We've taken away their skilled labour, which we shouldn't have, and we've done nothing to be responsible for that, to put investment back into those countries and back into those places. So I think we should be very careful if we're going to become sort of anti-immigrants. We need to take on the responsibility as a rich society with lots of resources. Thank you.
Yeah, there are various forms of immigration and movement of people, and I just think we need to be a bit clear about what we're talking about. Obviously there are people asylum seekers who who have to go to other countries because they're facing persecution in their own country. The EU was actually in the process of introducing a common immigration and asylum policy, and this has been something which I think the government is making some progress on, though I think not enough. I recently went to one of the asylum centres where asylum seekers are actually put pending decisions being made about their cases, and it was a completely horrific experience. I mean, this was just the most awful place. I mean, I have been to worse places in my career in social welfare, but this was pretty low down on the list, actually. And I think it is quite wrong, actually, that asylum seekers who've done nothing wrong are actually kept in such conditions. So I would like to see that looked at, and really the whole policy speeded up. I think part of the problem is that the government doesn't put enough resources into it. I don't think it's necessarily the policy. I mean, if actually applications would turn around quickly, you wouldn't need to put them in awful conditions. And the EU itself is working towards a common policy on asylum and immigration, which is actually probably quite sensible, because there have been instances such as French actually offloading people to other countries, which is not helpful. So I think if all EU member states had equal responsibility and had to do the same things, it would help. I mean, there's also the question of the movement of labour within the European Union, which has been particularly problematic with the enlargement of the EU and Eastern European people coming to this country. A lot of them haven't stayed very long and have gone back home when they've earned a bit of money and done whatever else they wanted to do here. And I think on the whole that's been positive, because they did come, most of them, over when the economy here was better, and they did very valuable jobs. And I think we should always recognise this when we're talking about immigration, that most of the people who come here actually do valuable things, often jobs that people who live here, indigenous people if you like, don't want to do, and we should never lose sight of that. The other thing in terms of movement of people is the criminal element. I mean, I've done a lot of work on trafficking, particularly of women and children, and there is a growing movement, and then also there's the whole question of gang masters and exploitation of people, and there is a growing criminal element which really does exploit people and moves and exploits people against their will, and I think we must put more resources into that to prevent that happening.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, can I take your question?
Is there a link between terrorism and foreign policy?
Sorry, can I?
Simple answer, yes, of course there is.
You'd get a round of applause if that was question time.
I could say yes, but I'm trying to think much more. I can understand terrorism is a result of people are being trapped and imprisoned and denied the opportunity for self-expression and for living their lives with their families. So eventually that forces them to become strong campaigners and then terrorists. So in a sense, of course there is. My passion is for the EU to become a benevolent power to spread democracy and freedoms around the world, and there's an awful lot to do, whether it's looking at trade and looking at the way we deal with other countries. But I think I have a vision that one day we will have a calm world where people are living calmly with each other and we won't have terrorism.
I would like to say yes, I think it is, but I think I mean, we were talking about Israel earlier, which I think has been the cause of some forms of terrorism. But I also think that domestic policies have something to do with it. When racist policies, to put it that way, are applied, and people who aren't white actually live in poor areas and don't have jobs, and they begin to, understandably feel very alienated, and that I think has been a huge amount of domestic terrorism in this country, and I think we are all responsible for that, and I think this government and previous governments have been responsible for it, and I think we really need to think about policies of how we actually ensure that people have jobs that can live fulfilling